Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of OP Radio. I'm your host, Mac. This is a weekly Twitter space / podcast we hold every week, every Wednesday, about anything and everything in the optimism ecosystem. Got a very interesting guest here today who's going to speak on a very interesting topic. We're joined by the mysterious Mark Tyneway. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Mac. Thanks for having me back on here.
Absolute pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on, Mark. And I'm super excited to talk with you about today's topic. So let's just get right into it. So you recently attended an interesting gathering, something called Zuzalu. People may have heard about this, but can you just give us like a top level overview, Mark? What is this Zuzalu thing that you went to?
Yeah, totally. So Zuzalu was an experiment. And basically the idea is that, the way that we organize ourselves in society today, it's just like really not serving everyone. Like a lot of people are like really unhappy. Depression rates are, at an all-time high. There's like a lot of people just aren't satisfied with the way that society is organized. So Zuzalu is like an experiment in organizing people. And the idea is that if you kind of think about events, there's like a lot of events that are just a day or two, or like maybe like a week long. And then there's like, events or like gatherings that kind of last like indefinitely. But there's not a lot of events that kind of last in this like intermediate range of like within like a few months. So it's kind of like an experiment in seeing like, what does a gathering of people look like where you get together for a few months and you're able to like spend more time with each other rather than just like, say, getting together for like a week?
Very cool. Very interesting. I don't want to dwell on it too much because here at Optimism, we like to dwell on the positive, not the negative. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Mark. There's a loneliness epidemic, I think. People are more atomized than ever. And a huge part of that, I think, is this dearth of community. I think people are lacking community in the modern era. A lot of people are. And so it sounds like this is an opportunity for a bunch of like minds to get together and, foster that sense of community.
Yeah, it's really interesting because one of my main takeaways from Zuzalu is really like, it got me thinking, like, what even is community? And like, is it possible to think of community from first principles? And what I mean by that is like, are our preconceived notions of what is possible in community building just like, kind of outdated? Can we create a new sense of community that like we haven't even like imagined before as like a civilization or like as a species?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, why not? I mean, if you think about what do most people kind of get together and do nowadays? I mean, people do all kinds of things, but I think we could definitely take a more creative approach to how we get together and organize.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, blockchain technology plays a really important role in all of this because, one of the, main benefits of blockchain technology is like this concept of credible commitments, right? Where people that are coordinating can credibly commit to doing something. And you don't need to like worry about them backing out of the commitment. And you can kind of make like arbitrarily complex commitments very cheaply. Whereas like without a blockchain, you'd have to like, find like a lawyer to like write up a contract and then, pay that lawyer. And then actually, if your counterparty doesn't follow through, you'd have to like go through a legal process. It just takes like a lot of time and money. And so like, there's no real reason to like do this kind of without blockchains. So I think that this kind of concept of credible commitments with social coordination is a fundamentally new primitive that we have yet to explore deeply with blockchain technology and communities.
Mark, so was this used at Zuzalu? Maybe you could provide like a specific example of like a commitment.
Oh yeah, good question. So I'm not gonna lie, this was like not heavily used at Zuzalu because it's just so early. Like I feel like this is going to be a narrative for blockchains probably within a couple of years, hopefully. But an example of a credible commitment is it's actually the side project that I've been working on. It's called Pact. And the idea is it is this mutual assurance contract system. And basically it's like, think of like Kickstarter for everyday things. And the idea is that if you want to like coordinate with someone, you can credibly commit to doing something, right? And in this example, the credible commitment is like kind of staking a little bit of ETH on, doing something. So let's say that we wanted to go out to dinner and we wanted to go out to dinner on Friday, but everyone's calendars are like busy. You never know if like someone isn't a flake. So what I would be able to do is I'd be able to put down like, I'm going to put down, like 500 gwei. I'm going to put that down and say, I'm committing to going out to dinner on Friday. And then you can show that to all of your friends. And then your friends can be like, oh, like this person is serious about going out to dinner on Friday. Like, I'll put down, 500 gwei as well. And then the more people that kind of put down the money, it increases the signal. It increases the likelihood that it's a truthy, statement that everyone is committed to doing this thing. So then it makes it easier for the next person to commit. And then you can kind of have different rules around the resolution. In this case, you'd probably want everyone to get their money back, or you'd want the money to like be pooled together and then used to pay for the dinner.
Very interesting. Okay, so people are basically putting skin in the game to follow through on things that they say they're going to do.
Yeah, this is one example of a credible commitment scheme. And this is just like a side project that I've been working on. The smart contracts are all, free software, open source. You can find them on my GitHub, github.com/tines/pact, I believe. So yeah, if you're interested, they're already deployed on, a bunch of different networks. You can use them through Etherscan. I mean, I don't really recommend using them, to be honest, but check out the code if you're interested. But this is one example of like a human coordination application built using credible commitments that I think that like this style of application will be the kind of really popular blockchain applications that ended up being used by everyday people in the future.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people can relate to maybe they're trying to organize something and a third party says that they're going to do it, but then doesn't end up following through. I think we're all quite familiar with that small disappointment, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because like right now it's kind of hard to tell, especially when you don't know someone very well, right? Because when you get to know someone, then basically reputation is kind of like these social tokens, right? Social tokens were like this like meme thing that were popular for a little bit, but we kind of all have like in our heads, we hold a ledger of like social tokens of other people, right? And like that's kind of like a reputation system. And you can't really like learn about other people's reputation until you interact with them or someone tells you about them, right? So this kind of system would make it easier to like trust people that you don't know that well, and it would reduce the cost of coordinating with them.
Okay, this is absolutely fascinating because we know that it takes a while to really get to know someone and to trust them. So this could potentially be this on-chain ledger that demonstrates that someone basically keeps their word. That could allow you to trust them, to bring them inside your circle of trust a lot quicker.
Yeah, exactly. And then the idea is that I see this kind of simple example of like Pact, this mutual assurance contract, is kind of just being like the first baby step. And then basically you could imagine that there could be this like network of credible commitments for different things between different people that kind of become arbitrarily complex, and you're all like automated and coded on chain. And this network would like reduce the cost of coordination between people, and it would kind of offset all of the mental overhead of having to like judge whether or not you should like decide to like work with someone. And then like you can kind of just like get like automated suggestions of like whether or not you should like work with someone, do something, go someplace with someone. Because like the history of technology is all about kind of offloading mental overhead to like automation in the machines. So I think that this is going to allow us to kind of offload a lot of the need to like make social judgments about whether or not you should coordinate with people.
Okay, so I have an odd edge case here, Mark, maybe an oddly specific one, but I'm curious. So let's say that someone makes a commitment, right? But then we all know that life happens. So for some reason, there's like a valid reason that they cannot fulfill that commitment. What is the solution there, right? Because that, depending on the circumstance, that shouldn't necessarily count against them, right? That shouldn't be a bad mark on this social public ledger.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, like this is people, and we don't want to like make everything like super systematized and like have very particular scores and de-anonymize people. There needs to be like a flexible kind of system that works for the people and not against the people. So we would just need to make sure, like one of the key tenets of kind of building blockchain systems is allowing exit, right? If the system exists in a way where it's not, taking into account the human nature of sometimes plans change, then someone else should be able to come up and build a competing system that does take into account that. And then if it's solving a real need that the people want, all the people should be able to migrate to it and exit the old system. So assuming that there's no monopoly, that there's no walled garden, and there's an efficient market, then that problem shouldn't exist. But, walled gardens exist. It's our job to prevent walled gardens.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't realize we were going to go down this rabbit hole, Mark, but that's super interesting. I didn't realize you were working on solving accountability. Fascinating problem. So, Mark, I think I'd like to move on to Zuzalu now and talk about the specifics there. For the people that weren't able to attend, I wonder if you could just sort of paint us a picture of what your time was like there. Like, what did you do on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, Zuzalu was a really interesting time. It was kind of like this gathering of people. Different people stayed for different amounts of time, but there was kind of a focus on cryptocurrencies, longevity, biotech, AI, and people with different interests. These different interests kind of all got together and kind of just lived together for 3 months. And it was amazing every morning, just waking up and walking down to get breakfast. We kind of stayed in this like little village where it was easy to basically walk to everyone's house. Like, I think that is like one amazing thing, because a lot of cities, especially in the United States, are kind of designed around cars. And in a car first kind of place, it's really difficult to kind of get to other places in the city. Like, the roads are the priority, and it leads to like, more noise, more pollution in the city. So like living someplace where walking is like the kind of priority, and being able to walk everywhere, that was just like really refreshing. And so every day, everyone would just like basically walk down to breakfast, and you never knew like what sort of conversation you would have. Every single day, it was like a different conversation that was super interesting, because so many people there were just like passionate about life, and they were passionate about what they were into. And the environment really kind of cultivated that passion, because it was so easy to find people that were interested in hearing what you were talking about. So I felt like there was this fulfillment, this social fulfillment, that it was just so much more convenient to be fulfilled socially than in kind of living in everyday life outside of Zuzalu. And then, on the topic of breakfast, one of the kind of tenets was living healthily, right? And I don't know if y'all are familiar with biology and his whole like network state thing, but like he talks about this idea of like a moral innovation. And it's kind of like an abstract term. I didn't really understand what a moral innovation really meant until I was at Zuzalu and I experienced this moral innovation of health. A lot of people at Zuzalu were like really focused on just like living healthily. And the idea was that the more people that are all together focused on living healthily, it reduces the overall cost to living healthily. It reduces the cost of sourcing and preparing the food because you can buy in bulk. It reduces kind of the social cost because sometimes like you don't want to go to the gym because you don't want to miss out on socializing. Well, if you're with a group of people that want to socialize at the gym, then, you know, you can get your socializing in and you can get your gym time in. So there's this economy of scale when it comes to culture and habits. So the moral innovation at Zuzalu was living healthily.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned habits, Mark, because this sounds like something I've learned about habits, which is that you want to make it as easy as possible for yourself to do that habit, right? So if you want to learn the guitar, for instance, you should place that guitar in a prominent point in your living room. Make sure it's somewhere you're going to see it every day, and that's going to make it that much more likely that you're going to pick up that guitar and practice it. So in this situation, it sounds like you were surrounded by all these people that were living a healthy lifestyle, interested in health. And that just made it so much more easy for each individual to practice a healthy lifestyle.
Exactly. Yeah, because sometimes it's hard when you're just like by yourself and you kind of have to just, you know, go down this path and you don't have anyone to like experience it with you. Like a lot of people just like give up, including myself, when you don't have other people like going down this path with you. So, and it really got me thinking about, you know, how to cultivate habits. And like you said, Mac, it's really important to make the habits convenient, right? Like whatever you want to do, it should be like as convenient as possible. And then it got me thinking, you know, how do you design habits from first principles? Like if we had like kind of like a blank slate, how would you set up your living environment to ensure that it's really easy to do the most important habits for you?
Yeah, having those things in place. For instance, you know, like having fresh fruit available in your kitchen instead of a bunch of snacks filled with sugars and stuff is absolutely crucial. So I found this in my own life that really putting these things in place beforehand so that I don't have to think about them when I undertake that habit is very important and a huge life hack. And I'm constantly relearning that lesson, by the way, because sometimes, you know, I won't go through the work of buying the healthy food that I should have in my kitchen. And at the last minute, I get hungry and I go out and I eat something that I probably shouldn't have because I wasn't prepared and I didn't thoughtfully design my environment to make it easier for me to practice that good habit.
Totally, exactly. And yeah, like Brian Johnson says, never to make decisions like late at night or like when you're really hungry because, you know, you'll, you know, go for that like junk food or whatever. But yeah,
my version is never grocery shop hungry.
Yeah, exactly. But I think like you just illustrated the example that I was kind of getting at was when it's just you know, it's easier to fail because, you know, now it's your sole responsibility to make sure that you're in this environment. And that makes the good habits convenient. But when you're with, you know, a group of people, then, you know, a little bit of that responsibility can get offloaded to everyone in the group and you can kind of scale those good habits together.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Typical American that I am, I approach things from this, you know, individualistic perspective. You know, I wanted to mention, Mark, when you brought up this town and how everybody's kind of, well, they're in closer proximity to one another. Yeah, it's very interesting to reflect on how cultures, their modes of transportation may reflect their culture. And as you mentioned, America is it's a car country, right? Now, is that just reflecting this individualistic American spirit, or is it creating it? I think it's probably both. I think it's probably a feedback loop. I think you're right. I think if you surround yourself with people who are practicing these good habits, you're just going to make it that much more easier for yourself. Like you don't need to do everything on your own. That would seem to be playing the game on hard mode.
Yeah, totally. And I think one thing that, living at Zuzalu kind of showed me was that like all of this is possible and like all of it is just a choice. And like, sure, like living, there's, monetary kind of constraints, but like it is possible to kind of rethink the way that you're living your life and basically like really like stack rank the kind of habits and the way that you want to live and rethink the way that you want to relate to people and like the people that you want to relate with. And that's what Zuzalu made me completely rethink. And at this point, I'm trying to, experiment more and basically figure out, what does it mean to have the most ideal community? And what are the most important properties of a community that I would feel best in?
Yeah, I think the blessing and curse of modernity is optionality, right? So we have an unprecedented amount of choices and options in front of us, which is incredible, right? That's empowering. But it's on us to make the right choices. I think maybe historically, a lot of cultures and societies, you wouldn't have this degree of choice, but you maybe had this structure passed on to you, right? Through your culture, through your family. Now, a lot of that has fallen away, right? And so I think it's on all of us to create these communities for ourselves. So that's a very exciting prospect, right? But it's also a little bit daunting.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, we have like this paradox of choice, and you're right. It is like a lot of effort to create these communities. And that's why I think it's really important to basically commoditize and open source the process of being able to create like a Zuzalu like environment. Like, we normally talk about open source in, terms of software, but I believe that like process can also be open sourced. And, like the process of, say, organizing people. Also, you can open source, like, I mean, in the long term, we should really have, the open source ability to like, create food. We should have like basically the open source ability to like create shelter. Basically everything that everyone needs to gather and like live together in a place should be commoditized. So the cost is pushed down as low as possible. So it's really easy for people to like come together and gather and create like a Zuzalu like experience if they desire.
Yeah, it almost reminds me, I've been reading a lot of sci-fi lately. And, a lot of times when you have these human tetraformers who go out into the universe, right? A lot of times they carry with them the blueprints of human society in the form of information, whether that be DNA, so they can maybe reconstitute the animals and plant life that are on Earth, or in the form of information so that they can, 3D print or fabricate their own make-ready environment on whatever planet they happen to land on. So yeah, this is very interesting. If we're, cataloging and making open source the blueprint in effect for how to recreate these communities.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the ideas that people were talking about at Zuzalu was basically that Zuzalu should be forkable, right? Like who is like in control of like the Zuzalu IP, right? Like right now it's kind of early. So like there is like a group of kind of organizers and there's, it's kind of difficult to like scale it to the world. But the idea is that eventually, there should be many Zuzalus and there should be, at least one Zuzalu running it every time so that digital nomads can basically, move between them all around the world. And then, different Zuzalus will have different preferences and different moral innovations. And then, people should be able to like, go to the ones that appeal to them the most and easily be able to like enter and exit. And all this is only possible if we kind of commoditize the process of, and push down the cost of creating a Zuzalu-like event.
Interesting. Some of what you just said, Mark, makes me think that maybe I've been approaching this concept of the network state with some of these old ideas and old conceptions. When I think about the network state, it's often, I'm like, well, it needs to have a permanent physical space. But when you were kind of describing this just now, I thought, well, maybe that's not necessarily the case. Maybe this could be, it's almost like a pop-up community that occurs and it sort of, moves around the globe.
Yeah, totally. I think that, there's kind of this idea that like there's a strict definition of network state. Biology tries to define it. I think that we shouldn't allow for like there to be like a singular definition. It's more of like this design space, right? I think that there's going to be like many different types of network states, ones that are physically permanent, ones that are physically permanent and like pop up from place to place, ones that are digital, like kind of in the, metaverse. So yeah, and I think that they'll be very different in kind of what their beliefs are and kind of what ties the people together that, spend their time there.
Yeah. I wonder, Mark, and this is quite a broad question, but I wonder for people listening, like, how do you think they could get started if they wanted to, I don't know, find a community like this? It doesn't necessarily need to be Zuzalu, but if they wanted to find something similar, any thoughts there on where a good place to start would be?
Yeah, totally. I think right now, really, the internet is like the best place. I mean, it's the cheapest place to access. Like many people have internet access, and once you have the internet, then you can kind of communicate with people from all around the world at the speed of light. So definitely, like the place to start is to find like-minded people on the internet, whether it's Twitter or Discord or Telegram. Those are probably the places with, highest signal to like find, like-minded people. And then you kind of have to build a community. It's like a lot of people make Discord servers and they just like hang out and chat all day. And then kind of once you have that, kind of rapport in your community, then it becomes possible to like gather in person, right? And I think that there's like, a lot of times like gatherings will just be, everyone will just show up in the same location. But what Zuzalu made me rethink was kind of the amount of intention in, setting up like the ground rules for a gathering. And what I mean by that is you could, invite a bunch of people together and you can create some like rules of what is this time meant to be like when we are together. An example of this would be, if we were going to go down like kind of like the fitness path, because it's like one of the things that people focus on at Zuzalu, was an example would be, okay, we're going to rent an Airbnb or, a hotel, a couple hotel rooms or something, and we're going to spend a month together and in this location. And we're going to put down, 0.1 ETH and we're going to put it into this pool. And if there's going to be a scheduled morning workout every single day. And if you attend, more than 50% of the scheduled workouts, then you get your money back. Otherwise, the pooled money, gets sent to the people that did do the workouts split evenly, or it's sent to like fund the, stay or something like that. So you kind of can build these like games, these like incentive games, like kind of into the gathering itself.
Mark, I'm picking up a recurring theme here, which is that this metaphor of, it's basically like hacking the human mind, right? So with the stuff we've talked about with commitments, with surrounding yourself with people who you want to emulate, these are all ways to sort of circumvent or program ourselves in a good way, right? Because I think we're all being programmed to one degree or another. We just want to make sure that programming is positive if possible.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Yeah, I think like one question is like, are you being programmed or are you programming? But yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of is this ties into like the credible commitments kind of thing. And, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but this reminds me of like our kind of relationship with the blockchain, right? The blockchain is out there and because everything is incentives, even before the blockchain, right? Like the whole economy, the way that society is structured is to like give people the incentives to like do the things to like keep society going, right? So in capitalism is designed to have like this little carrot that there's like a carrot dangling in front of us. And like, if we could only like get more money, we'll be able to like do the thing and have like higher social status. And, so there's like this carrot dangling in front of us, like keeping us moving forward. And basically, the blockchain is actually really interesting because it kind of like closes the loops on this process. It tightens the loops, the feedback loops. And basically, a thought experiment is kind of like thinking about the blockchain as like an organism, right? The blockchain is like this living organism that is trying to like survive and it's trying to grow. And what tools does the blockchain have at its disposal to like grow itself, right? So the blockchain basically, if it's an organism that wants to like grow, then it'll want to like recruit people to work for it, right? And it'll basically want to like convince people to be like aligned with the blockchain. So like, it'll want the people to like have their livelihoods depend on the livelihood of the blockchain. And so in a way, it's kind of like infecting the minds of the people, right? And it's getting the people to like work for the blockchain. And so it's
recruiting them to its service.
Exactly. So it's this kind of like, social techno capital machine that is building these feedback loops and getting people to be aligned with it so it can grow. Yeah, it's a little bit of a side. It's like a thought experiment.
But I love that metaphor. That is super interesting. Yeah, we're all kind of in a sense being programmed by the blockchain so it can grow and expand. Yeah, it's a lot to wrap my mind around, but that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and that it begs my question, are you being programmed or are you programming? But, I don't know, maybe like free will is like a rabbit hole that we don't need to go down into today. But yeah, maybe we can go back to like talking about Zuzalu and
okay, so what did some of these healthy activities at Zuzalu look like? I'm curious, Mark. I heard there was maybe some cold exposure. Were you guys doing like some group workouts together?
Yeah, great question. So in the mornings, there was like this ritual of going to a cold plunge. And I think that there's like maybe like a Bankless episode that might go into this a little bit, but basically every morning, people would wake up and, go out into the ocean and, jump into the water. And like it would basically be like this like cold plunge early in the morning. And there is a bunch of longevity people and biology people there. And, you'd get into the water and they'd be telling you like, oh, this is the biology, this is what's happening, this is the information about the studies that have been done. So you kind of be able to distract yourself from all the pain of being in the cold with all this like information about like why it's good for you. And so like I learned a lot and it kind of helped me, progressively get better at doing the cold plunge and being able to like go in. And it'd be like a group of like, maybe like 20 plus people all going into the water at the same time. And it's just like really hard to find that kind of community in the day-to-day world because, who has time in the morning to like wake up and, drive however far it is to like go see your friends and all meet up someplace where you can do a cold plunge. So Zuzalu is really special in making it so convenient to be able to cold plunge like first thing in the morning like that.
I love that. And I'm an absolutely huge fan of cold plunges. It's actually become a problem because I often find myself in a place where, like you said, it's very difficult to find, and I really miss it. I really like having access to to this simple thing that sometimes actually is hard to get together, which is, really cold water in a tub. I know exactly what you're talking about, Mark. With sometimes I've plunged with people and they know all the physiological effects. They're like Huberman. They'll tell you, what this is doing to your body. I take the more, I don't know if you're familiar with Laird Hamilton. He's a famous big wave surfer, but I like his description of cold plunging, which is like, people ask him why he does it. And he says, because I feel good after. And that's basically how I approach cold plunging. Is I don't know about the physical benefits, but I have definitely noticed the mental benefits. I feel extremely calm and clear. I think it's funny how everybody approaches that challenge, right? Because it is discomfort in a different way. I think a lot of people get in their head and they want to know that it's doing something good. But my experience has been to just breathe through it and be present in the moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. The breathing is key. Because then after enough time passes, like the kind of discomfort starts to go away, and then you're kind of just in this like almost numb state of like being in the water.
Euphoria.
Yeah, I like it. But
okay, and then Mark, I gotta ask you because I'm into my fitness. What kind of were you guys doing workouts together? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, people are doing like all sorts of different types of workouts. There were people that were running. There was like a lot of hiking. There were gyms. So like people were like, lifting at the gym. Every day there were like different activities that different people were holding, whether it's like some sort of like a yoga or movement. There's even like just like really obscure kind of things like I'm forgetting the word, like there was like climbing, all sorts of different activities that people were doing. And it was all like everyone would just like kind of self-organize. Like there was this calendar, and basically if you had a ZK passport, so the idea is that, like products, right? There's not a lot of like consumer facing crypto products that are like, that people love. And Zuzalu is like a testing ground for this amazing application made by 0x Park, where basically it's like a ZK passport, and it's built on using this like semaphore technology, which it basically lets you have like a key pair, right? And then you can create a inclusion proof into a set without revealing your identity. And what this basically allows you to do is this allows you to anonymously add events to a calendar. That was like one application of this. And the idea was people wanted to be able to like, we need to like desperately test out and use applications using, blockchain technology and, using ZK technology. And so this was a great place to test this out. And so this ZK passport, if anybody wanted to add a event to the calendar, you would have to, log into the website, and then you could create a proof using your key pair and put an event on the calendar. And it was like permissionless to do so as long as you could provide a proof that you were a Zuzalu resident. And so what this allowed for was like a lot of spontaneity. Everybody was able to basically add events. They would just like come up with an idea like, oh, like I want to do a yoga class later today. I want to teach it. So I'm going to just, add it to the calendar. And then there was a hyperlink that you could like use to import the calendar, say like into your, Gcal or your Apple Calendar or whatever. And then as people updated the calendar, it would automatically push out updates to people's phones. So you can just look at your calendar on your phone and you can see all of the events that are going on every day.
Why the emphasis on anonymity there, Mark? It seems like an intentional design decision.
Yeah, it's a good question. To be honest, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if it's like the anonymity is like particularly important in this like use case, but I think it was more of the importance here is around, inclusion in the set. So there's like a set of Zuzalu residents, and basically as long as you can provide a proof that you're in the set, I do believe in practice, I did show who the organizer was. But technically, the way that this semaphore works is like you don't necessarily need to like reveal, who created the proof. But really, what this was all about was getting this technology in the hands of people. Because one of the problems that we have in this industry is like, what is product market fit for like consumer facing applications? Like how many founders are like on the ground, going to everyday people and asking them to like try out their applications, right? We're like, at least maybe I am just like not in the right crowd, but I work on more the infrastructure side. I'm not super familiar with like people, building a lot of, consumer facing applications where they're actively like, working on the UX. A lot of the applications are like kind of like DeFi or, NFTs, and they're very financial focused. They're less focused on like coordination and identity, which those are the things that are interesting to me. And I think will be what makes this technology actually useful in the real world.
But it has to be easy to use, right? At the end of the day, to bring it back to your point of these things need to be tested, the UX needs to be vastly improved.
Yeah, exactly. And then, having like a group of people together that are all kind of crypto native is a really good opportunity to basically get that feedback. And because one fallacy that I think, or like a hot take that I have, is I don't think that we should be building applications to bring net new people into the ecosystem. We should be building applications that target crypto native people, that basically we need an application that crypto native people love to use every single day and they cannot use without, or they cannot live without. The only application that I'm aware of that is this is Telegram, to be honest. Like crypto native people love Telegram. They talk on it, even though it's like not encrypted. It's like fake encrypted. A lot of people think that it is encrypted, but it's not. That is like the killer app right now for crypto native people. But it's like not really even built using blockchains unless you count like the like Telegram chain ton. But like if you're in the United States, you're not allowed to use it. There's a history there. Go read about it on the internet. But like we need to build consumer facing applications that crypto native people love and cannot live without. And gatherings in person are a great place to test out these applications.
Okay, to play devil's advocate here, Mark, because I think this is interesting. To push back a little, I think crypto native people are willing to put up with a lot worse UX and kind of jump through a lot of hoops to do this stuff that the normal person just isn't willing or able to do. So are they really the best market to test these applications on? We're kind of a strange bunch. I think we're much more technologically savvy and maybe willing to put up with a lot more than the normal person would.
Oh, definitely. We are a strange bunch, and I would not have it any other way. But you are right that, we would be willing to like put up with the difficulties and the bad UX and the dangers of like losing your private key. But the reality is that as an industry, we're still at this point where all of these things are, part of the UX, and it's going to take a long time to get to a point where the UX is good enough for someone that has, no idea what a blockchain is before they can use it, right? Like to use a blockchain, you still have to, understand a block explorer. You still have to like kind of know what gas is. You kind of have to know like what like ether is. People that use the internet, like they don't know what, TCP IP is. They don't know like what these underlying protocols are. We're still so early that we don't have the right abstractions for people to understand how to use this technology. And because of that, it's really up to the people that do understand these abstractions to, use the technology, and then it'll accelerate the applications, and it'll accelerate the usage, which will create this like cycle where like then the usage goes up, more problems are being solved for people in the real world, even though it's like a small niche of people, then, more funding comes in, and then, people can then, build better abstractions over time, and then, pull more non-crypto natives in, and then iterate towards this world where it's really easy and it's actually more convenient to use the crypto version of the application than the non-crypto version of the application.
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. We're in essence the guinea pigs, the test subjects for this. That makes sense. Yeah, I guess I think you could make the argument that the UX is a product. Like one-click checkout, like that is a product. And so I don't know if we're going to be able to scale and get beyond this industry without vastly improving this UX.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think that key management is probably the biggest thing that's holding back the industry right now. And there's like a lot of hype around, smart contract wallets, ERC 4337, kind of solving this. I'm really curious to see how it all plays out. I'm hopeful that additional iterations of kind of smart contracts wallets on top of, past ERC 4337, gaining more mainstream adoption. I think that we'll learn a lot kind of from this iteration. I think that we'll need to continue to build and make it easier for it to be truly usable by end users.
Well, Mark, I want to be cognizant of your time. I know you've got another commitment here today. This has absolutely delivered. I almost feel guilty for how fun and interesting this conversation has been. We've really spanned a bunch of topics from cold plunging to account abstraction, real world use cases in crypto. So thanks, Mark, for joining us on OP Radio. It's always a pleasure. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.
Awesome. Thank you. And I appreciate all of y'all listening. And, don't forget about Ether's Phoenix.
Stay optimistic, y'all. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.